Global supply chains accounting for about 80% of the planet's carbon emissions will need as much as $100 trillion in investment to meet net zero pollution pledges over the next 30 years, according to a new private sector paper that calls for better coordination. $100 trillion, almost the size of global GDP this year, is a lot of green. The research released by HSBC and Boston Consulting stresses that about nearly half their total will be needed to help small to medium-sized enterprises comply.
Working more efficiently enables businesses to have better profit margins. It provides an additional level of capital that they can use to fund some of these newer products that are out there to go more green and more sustainably.
The paper's timing is good, given the United Nations climate talks that start in Glasgow, a city with a rich mining and steel manufacturing heritage. The Cop26 conference is getting interesting on a number of fronts. The UK host is already balking at any deal that consigns coal to economic history. And Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak promised to cut taxes on fuel and flying, exactly the opposite sort of incentives environmentalists argue are needed. Australia, a continent repeatedly ravaged by bushfires and floods, has resisted moves that might undermine key industries like mining, leaving it increasingly isolated at Cop26 conference.
And some incentive for companies or manufacturing to do in a more environmentally friendly.
In Washington, President Joe Biden was counting on sweeping climate legislation to prove America's commitment to the fight against global warming. But even his allies are conceding the most they will have is a framework subject to further negotiations.
Maybe there's a scenario where we have to change some of our manufacturing processes to make them greener, but honestly, we're probably already looking at doing that anyway. So I fully support it.
Climate change affects everyone, but it does not affect everyone equally. Some countries might be submerged by the ocean, whereas other countries like Russia, a higher temperature might actually open up more frozen port. Same with the companies. Some companies might find it challenging, whereas other companies may find more opportunities out of this. While the politicians dawdle, the private sector is pressing ahead. Apple just said it has more than doubled the number of suppliers exclusively using clean energy, advancing its pledge to have a fully carbon-neutral supply chain by 2030. Tech companies have been especially vocal about their clean power pledges, as the stakes could be higher for industries ranging from private tutoring to hat manufacturing.
So we don't have any animal product in that hat. We don't have any fur hats.
The students design experiments. We take water samples and compare them from around the area where we live, and we compare some of the weather patterns we have now to weather patterns we've had historically, and we talk about the impact of greenhouse gases, especially when we're doing our race car design class.
The UN Conference on Trade and Development in Geneva says the pandemic-induced supply disruption to global trade are just a prelude to the bigger challenge ahead, decarbonizing transport. Earlier this month, the head of United Nations said current targets are far too lax. Goals for shipping and aviation in particular aren't aligned with commitment to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius set at the 2015 Paris Accord. There is a real danger for the EV industry as well. Without clear rules, car owners will not invest early enough in the necessary infrastructure.
I think electric car is a good idea, but it's just not that practical yet. For example, when you drive from Boston to New York, I need a charge, and each charge takes 40 minutes. As opposed to a stop at a gas station, it takes 5 minutes.
A business-as-usual trajectory leading to temperature rises of 2.4 Celsius by 2050 would result in 10% lost output by the mid-century. In contrast, if countries can jointly limit temperature rise to 1.4 Celsius by the end of the century, the loss of global output would be reduced to 2.3% by 2050. Sizewood, China America Radio, Boston.